let's get on with some of the issues related to extinction. And here you have a couple questions that people asked. Okay, so let's go over some of those. Someone says USD collapsing doesn't mean Bitcoin collapse at the same time. Lead and hemp can be money too. You're going to have a hard time getting rid of all the money. These people don't understand. They're so into money, into investment and trade and all that stuff. You can't get their minds off of that. You know, they don't think that Bitcoin is money. Yeah, all things are money. Anything you can exchange, whether you barter or just use as currency, all of it is money. Okay? So you know, to say that Bitcoin is not going to fall when the dollars in the world and the euros in the world are no longer, you know, have no value, it's just incredible. It just shows how brainwashed people really are. You can't get them out of that mode. I can't even talk to a lot of these people, because they just close their ears and all they can understand is business and, you know, and investment and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Bitcoin is money. And if there are no dollars out there, then you can't have a world of just Bitcoin, okay? Because at some point you're going to have to trade them for example, dollars or euros or gold or something else that has value that you can exchange out there for, among other things, food, you know? And so to say that you get a lot of Bitcoins in your pocket, which is just this abstraction that's floating out there, without any other money on the planet, I don't think so. But yeah, this is what these people believe. You can't even talk to them. Another fellow says, what is it? The pandemic and lockdowns are to mask the death of fractional reserve banking. The lockdowns are there to control spending in the economy and stabilize feed prices until they can get us all on board with another bullshit criminal scheme. Real money cannot die. It's called barter. Their house of cards is coming down. All these people think of this conspiracy, you know, that the rich somehow are compelling everybody to go into this chicken coop, you know, the poor people, just putting them there and going to control them. You know, when the shit hits the fan and the world economy finally collapses, totally collapses, disintegrates so that nobody accepts money anymore and there is no more money, well, the rich have lost all their power. What are they going to do to keep their gangs, you know, the people who, their enforcers? What are they going to pay them with? Money? You know, again, and you know, the people who are the enforcers, they have no reason to have any loyalty to the boss anymore. And probably the first guy to go will be the rich guy. He's probably old, he's relying on all these young guys to protect him, and it turns out they say, hey, we don't need you, old man. So they might even eat him for all we know, you know, just put him on the barbecue. Yeah, no, when money collapses, there will be no loyalties. We're back to the Stone Age, where in the Stone Age we had no money. There was no such thing as trade, and we lived without trade for 90% of our existence, human existence. So no, this notion that you know, the world collapses, but you're still going to do your thing out there with money, or trade, or barter. No, in the asphalt jungle without money, no one trusts anybody, and there is no trade, because the only thing of value is food. And city folk don't seem to understand that, or they never thought about this, you know, at all. And one fellow says, you know, here along that same line, he says, food is money. No, food is not money. Food is money today, under our system today. So anything is money today. Even prostitution is money. You can give the girl for some money or whatever. You know, everything is money today. But the day that money collapses, that money is no more, that trade is no more, whatever food you have, you will not give away. If anything, you'll go out there and steal whatever someone else has. But you will not give the little food that you have away. To think that you're going to be bartering bananas for apples just shows the mentality of some people. That's all it shows. It shows how ignorant these people are. And these are city folk that think they're smart, you know. Yeah, incredible. Another fellow says, what? Money. Ending makes just as much sense as everyone forgetting to eat. You need to explain marketing with rational science to explain your hypothesis properly. Okay? Well, people don't understand that when money disappears completely, it's the end of food. And it's so hard to get that across to people today because we take food for granted. And yet, last year, I don't know if your memory reaches that far. What was it, April or May? They started rationing a lot of stuff, among them toilet paper. And I don't know if people remember that at all, but you could go you could go almost anywhere here in Germany. They ration food items, and people could not take more than one or two packets of different items from the shelves. Suddenly, overnight, here in a first world country, and you say, how can this happen here in Europe? Are we back to the days of the Weimar Republic where, they were going with their cartwheels full of money to buy a loaf of bread and scarcity and all that stuff? Soup kitchens. Are we going back to that? And yeah, we could go overnight, just like it happened last year. People don't realize how quickly things can deteriorate. Suddenly, you go to the supermarket and they don't allow you to take more than one item, two items or whatever. They put some rationing system in place, or worse, they might say, we can't sell you this, or we don't have any of this because we didn't receive any deliveries. A lot of stuff can happen, and that can happen overnight. So, when people don't understand that, it's just unbelievable. For me, it's just incredible. And before that, you need to explain the mechanism of how past extinctions, especially mass extinctions, happened. Extinction 101. See, people want to talk about man. Everybody's an expert on man. We all know man like the palm of our hands. And what do they say? They always argue the same thing. They know how man is not going to die. It's not going to die. Man's not going to disappear the way you say, Bill. Okay? And so what do you propose instead? And you'll never see or hear a proposal. You'll never hear them say, this is how man will disappear. And so you say, well, is it guaranteed? Is your mechanism, the one that you're proposing for man's extinction, assuming you believe that man's going to become extinct, right? That's the first question. But assuming you do believe that man's going to become extinct in the future, by what mechanism that man cannot elude? That's the question. Because if man can elude it, you don't have a foolproof system. Means that, I can have an antidote to your argument because I can come up and say, but this. And you say, well, yeah, we know that it's not foolproof. Well, then you don't have a mechanism. See, the food mechanism is a foolproof mechanism. If food disappears, man disappears. That part hopefully is undebatable, and you'd be surprised. People say, no, even if food disappears, man will be around. They'll say this, okay? So you got a lot of people who haven't even gotten past that point, And so, yeah, if food disappears, I think humans will disappear. That's a foolproof mechanism. Now, whether you believe food will disappear, that's a separate issue. But if food disappears, we make that assumption, well, hopefully you conclude that man will necessarily, invariably disappear. And sometimes it's very hard for people to even understand that much. It's incredible. Okay, so yeah, you got to do this. You got to do extinction 101 before you do extinction 102. What is extinction 101? Well, it's a mass extinction. You have to explain how the animals in the past died, okay, how they disappeared. And, today we have catastrophic theories from the so-called paleontology establishment. Not one in the last 200 years has been able to explain background extinctions or mass extinctions. Neither one. We don't have a foolproof mechanism for extinctions. And not one of them suspects that man will become extinct. So obviously they don't understand anything about extinction, and that's the job of a paleontologist. He's a medical examiner. He's a detective, a guy who studies death. That's what paleontology does. That's his job. He's got to tell us how species in the past died. That's his number one job. All the other stuff that, scraping bones from the rock and assembling them, giving a fancy name and putting them in a museum, that's not paleontology. That's stamp collecting. Okay? Paleontology is one thing and one thing only, and that's explaining how the animals in the past died. That's what we have to explain. And if you can't explain that, you're not a paleontologist. Just that simple. And then, once you explain past extinctions, you can move on to man and say, well, how will man become extinct? And here are the problems. Some people don't even recognize that humans are animals. They think we're not. We poop, we eat, we sleep, we have sex, some of us. and they still say, well, yeah, but we're not animals. But that's what all animals do out there. How are we different than animals? And we are categorized under mammals, okay, because we have our babies, women do, right, through their uterus. We don't lay eggs, not outside at least, we lay them inside. And And so people don't recognize that we're animal. We belong to the animal kingdom. We don't belong to the plant kingdom, and we don't belong to the rocks and mineral kingdom. We belong to the animal kingdom, and within that we belong to the mammals. And if mammals in the past have died, relatively recent past, and dinosaurs have died, and archosaurs have died, and mammal-like reptiles and amphibians, they've died in the past. These were all animals, right? Different kinds of animals. Well, since we're animals, we're probably going to die as well, disappear as well. We're going to become extinct. And so to say that, oh no, we're the only exception in the animal kingdom, we don't become extinct. Well, you know, again, a lot of brainwashing there, a lot of wishful thinking. And then, extinction can happen if food disappears. If, that's a big if, right? If food disappears, man will die. If we have nothing to eat, how long can you live without eating? I mean, you can live without breathing for a few seconds, maybe minutes. You can live without water, maybe a few days, right? But without food, you know, you can't live for a long time, okay? Certainly not, I don't think you can live over 2 months. Except an Indian guy who says he's been without eating for 45 years. And I always say with my son, yeah, old man, I know how it feels. You know, I haven't eaten since this morning. It's like I haven't eaten in 45 years too. Anyways, food chain collapse, it's a selective mechanism. Some animals die and some animals don't. So now we have a clue there that maybe that created the extinction of the dinosaurs and left the mammals alive. And they left a bunch of fish in the seas alive, whereas the reptiles, the mosasaurs and so on, they vanished. And in the air, you know, the pterodactyls, they were flying around, they disappeared. The flying reptiles, and what remained were birds. So it's a selective mechanism, the food chain. Okay, and that little square, little rectangle there that I've underlined there, food disappears if money disappears. Lots of people don't understand that, and people say, well, Bill, tell us how money is going to disappear. Well, we can't get that far because we're stuck on that other one. A lot of people still don't believe that if money disappears, food disappears. They're still wondering about that one. Forget about, money disappearing. Right now, they can't understand that if money disappears, food will disappear. And so we got to get to that step first. Okay, so yeah, I don't think it's worth even talking about how money will disappear yet, because there's too many people who don't believe that food disappears if money disappears. And I showed the chain of food the other day, the fact that all these connections only run because of money. And if you cut those chains of money, currency, anything, Bitcoin, if you cut that chain, the system doesn't run anymore. No one produces food, no one distributes food, the supermarkets don't sell food. And you can have all the money you want in the bank. It's not going to help you at all because there won't be any food because no one will be producing it. Why? Because money has disappeared and they have no pecuniary incentive to produce or distribute food. So that is the bottom line. Okay, here's another issue. It said how the food chain of dinosaurs disappeared. What was the cause behind the disappearance of food of dinosaurs? Okay, that's an important question, so let's address that. I've addressed it in the past. I'll just go quickly through it. Okay, here it is. Here you can see the types of plants that were around in the Devonian all the way to Cenozoic. Okay, and what you see there is that the ferns dominated early on. Then they were overtaken by the gymnosperms, and finally by the angiosperms, which is what rules the planet today. So the issue is that when a big family order of plants disappears, the animals that forged a relationship with those plants and carved niches in different types of plants of those days, when those plants disappear, the animal will disappear as well. It's just that simple. It's a relatively gradual process which then comes to an abrupt stop right at the end. But yeah, that is the mechanism. And here's another graph that I'd like to show. Okay, it's known as the Cretaceous terrestrial revolution. And you can see here's the blueprint, or here's the pattern that shows how dinosaurs disappeared. Okay, here it is. Okay, you can see the red there, those are the angiosperms. And we're talking about number of species, not quantities. But you can imagine that if there were more species of angiosperms, there were also more quantities of it in covering the planet and taking over the land. They were displacing the cycads, the ferns as well. There was a fern spike towards the end, but they were replacing the cycads, the conifers, the ginkgos. Okay, there's only one strand of ginkgo today. Okay, and so you can see what happened from about the middle, maybe a little earlier, of the Cretaceous. The angiosperms started muscling in on all the other plants, and they eventually covered the land. Today, most of our planet only has angiosperms. Okay, we have conifers, but no mammal really eats conifers, and we don't eat ferns. Okay, maybe there's one or two exceptions out there. You got to look through it. Someone who says, "Oh, this animal eats this part of the fern over here, like something special." And mammals don't eat ferns. Mammals don't eat conifers. So guess what happens when angiosperms disappear? And it turns out we don't eat all angiosperms. Like humans, we don't eat grass. And some of the grasses out there are weeds. We don't eat a lot of those things, and those are angiosperms. They're flowering plants. We don't eat a lot of those. We eat special types of angiosperms, And so when those plants disappear, we disappear. And that's essentially what happened to the animals in the past. Their food sources, they were these big jungles originally, big forests, and they became shrinking islands, what I call my shrinking island process, where the food sources become smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually the animals can't find enough to eat, and they begin to have problems, and their numbers begin to decrease. Okay? So it has to do with plants disappearing, and this is the mechanism. I call it the overturning of the population pyramid of plants. And you'll see two graphs here, or two images here. One has to do with the overturning of the animal kingdom, the other one with the plant kingdom. Okay, here it is. Okay, the one on the top is the animal kingdom, and you can see what happens. We have 10-to-1 ratio between trophic levels. There's about 10 times as much primary production as there are herbivores. There's about 10 times as many herbivores as there are predators. Okay, what happens towards the end is that overturns. Why? Because as you can see, what happens is what disappears there is the greenery, the primary production. And what happens to the greenery, to the primary production, is that their population pyramid overturns. Okay? And you have with that a loss of genetic diversity. You see a lot of plants today, I mentioned this in the past, where you find peaches. I grow different kinds of plants and fruits out there. You got a little plot of land. And I do it just for investigation, for research. And, I have this beautiful peach tree. And last year I had five Siamese twins among the peaches. They come out like two, blended by the belly. So you have a double peach come out. And I had 5 of those on my tree. And it turns out when you look at the history of peaches, a few thousand years ago, they were like little berries. And because of human, artificial selection, we made them grow over time. We selected and planted what we really wanted. And the peaches grew over time. Today we have these, they're not berries anymore. They look more like apples, apple size, pear size. But the peaches have lost their genetic diversity. And so now you can see why we're having Siamese twins come out of the trees. And it's not only the peaches. I mean, if you look on the internet, just look up images for Siamese fruits and veggies, and you'll find out which ones are at the end of the line, because a lot of them are coming out as Siamese twins, meaning from my theory that they lost their genetic diversity. And if you add to that the fact that a lot of them are coming out without seed. We have seedless grapes, seedless watermelons, or the seeds are becoming smaller, and we have seedless limes and so on. A lot of these trees are grown vegetatively. They go out there and they pull out a little branch and they stick it in the ground, they grow another tree, and so it's all cloning. And that's not good for humanity, because we don't have the plants growing normally the way they should. And all we're doing is extending their, life expectancy. A lot of these plants should have gone, sour a long time ago, and we're keeping them alive by replanting them over and over. Okay, anyways, here's another issue. Fellow raises, guess you must hate women. He says, lack of patriarchy, not cities, is the common factor, Bill. Patriarchal societies still have kids. He thinks it's an issue of this thing we had in the past where men dominated, and now women are coming up to speed and they're more or less, becoming our equals. And so, I have a couple of arguments. One is that bacteria growing on a piece of bread, they're not organized patriarchally. And that's why you have to do Extinction 101 before you do Extinction 102. You got to look at why animals and why plants disappeared in the past. And also why, they went through this population curve, okay? And so, no, it's guaranteed all species will eventually get to their curve, their S curve. And the S curve, as I explained in a couple videos ago, ends up in extinction, always. It's not an S curve like, it stops there. They should continue with the S curve and shows that it goes all the way to zero. And 10 families patriarchal nuclear within a sea of bachelors is not equal to reproduction. Today we have a world of bachelors, and more people are not getting married. There are no long-term relationships. And so when you have whatever group is still out there that still has, follows the traditions, me among them, where you get married, you have kids, and so on, and you live happily ever after, that's going away very fast. And today we have a world of bachelors, essentially. If there is reproduction, it's very little per couple. And then they divorce, they each get new partners, then most of them don't want to have kids, and so on and so forth. That's why we're not having children. But we're not having children in that scenario because we moved to the cities. The key issue is that we went from the country to the cities. And when you have high density areas, you get into density dependent birth rates. And so you got to look up these terms and find out what they mean and why it's deterministic, not free will. Women don't have the free will to have babies. People say, you're crazy, Bill. My wife can have a baby whenever she wants. Well, why doesn't she? Why doesn't she have a baby? With you, maybe with her neighbor. But no, we're not having babies collectively. That's the issue. You can't go and say, well, my wife can have a baby whenever she wants. Well, yeah, maybe she can, but she doesn't. When you take many families, many couples together, most of them will not have babies. Okay, that's the issue. And if they do have babies, they won't have many. They won't have 10 kids like we used to have in the 19th century. Half of them died, but it didn't matter. You still had 5. Today, it's not even close. Okay? So, no, it's density-dependent birth rate. And here you see a little image of that. I showed it in the past, but let me show it one more time so you know what I'm talking about. Here it is. Okay, there you have a couple fruits. Okay, this has nothing to do with patriarchy. Okay, what you have there is I call it the water gets you drunk theory. People say, well, water with whiskey gets you drunk, water with beer gets you drunk, water with wine gets you drunk, so water's the common factor, right? Well, that's more or less what this fellow, Aaron, his reasoning. No, it's density-dependent birth rates, and there you see it. When the bacteria or the fungus or whatever, attacks a fruit or a veggie or whatever, they grow at first exponentially. If we could count each unit in there, each individual, you would see that it's growing exponentially. But then after a while, they've eaten the fruit and now they've got this density dependence. They can't continue expanding exponentially, and that's when the curve turns. Okay? So, and it's got nothing to do with patriarchy. Yeah, maybe they changed their habits, their culture. That could be. But why did they change their culture? Because of density dependence. Okay, another question here, another comment. Lots of comments on this. That's why I'm covering that, because there are lots of issues there. Could the lack of biodiversity in humans be due to a rather recent bottleneck in population? Well, again, all these are theories. Okay, keep that in mind. All these are theories. You can believe whichever theory you want. You just got to look at different theories and then make up your own mind. If people are interested in the subject, they'll do research and they'll find theories out there. Some you accept, some you reject, depending on your upbringing, your training, whatever. Many mammals that have been around for a while and have inbred to exhaustion have lost their genetic diversity. So it's not that there was a recent bottleneck in human population or anything like that. It's that we're not the only animal that is approaching density-dependent mode. Okay? There's other animals. You look at the lions. About 50 years ago, there were 150,000 lions estimated, right, in Africa, and today's only about 35,000 and dropping, even with conservationist measures. And again, when population drops so drastically, you get also into the issue of genetic diversity. You lose genetic diversity because the few that remain, they're more or less cousins and part of maybe the same family, the same great grandfathers, the same founders effect. So yeah, what happens is when you reduce the population, you have less genetic diversity, especially if these animals have been around for a long time. Okay? And so yeah, lions have lost their genetic diversity. Not to mention the cheetahs. Cheetahs have no genetic diversity. Probably the animal on Earth that has the least amount of genetic diversity, or one of the ones. Maybe the Komodo dragon is around there as well. Okay, and that's why you got to do Extinction 101 before 102. You got to talk about animals before you talk about this animal called man. Okay, another comment issue says, in such scenario, I think North Korea would do really well because they have plenty of autonomy, grow a lot of their own food, everything is state-owned, everyone has to do military conscription, etc. North Korea would actually last really well in a world where the global economy plummets. People are so mistaken. They're so mistaken. I've been to Cuba and several times. And, like Cuba, like North Korea, it's a capitalist country inside Cuba to a great extent. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a saying, or there was a saying in Cuba when Castro was around, and it's like, Fidel Castro will not intervene in your daily activities if you don't intervene in politics. Each one has his own realm. And so, yeah, they say, well, Cuba is all controlled everywhere, which it is, but the black market is booming. It's always been booming, all the way to 1959. People, trade in secret, and they some not so secret. It's like an open secret. Everybody knows that. Everybody trades. And one time I was driving down the highway and with a Cuban friend, and the cops had stopped an individual who was coming from the country to the city. In the city, there's a lot of stuff that's missing. You don't have a lot of food, especially meat. There's almost no meat in the cities, in Havana, old Havana, and so on. And in the country, they live like kings in comparison because, you grow your own chickens, you grow your own pigs, whatever, and you can slaughter one of them without anyone knowing and, having a feast. And so what a lot of the country folk do to get some stuff from the city, they bring in their little piglets and chickens and so on, and they bring them, to the city. But then you have the cops, and the cops, they patrol the highway. Highway patrol, Broderick Crawford. and so they stopped this man, and he had some pigs in his truck. And the cops saw it there, but the guy did was simply bribe the cops. And everybody went on their merry way. The cops went one way, and this fellow came the other way, and he just brought his stuff to the city. So yeah, there's a black market in Cuba. I've seen people who work in restaurants take stuff home. So, to say that Cuba and North Korea and all these countries that are communist are going to be different, no. They have to have commerce with the West. And there you see it. North Korea has commerce with and depends heavily on China. And North Korea wants U.S. economic sanctions lifted. Why? If they don't do any commerce, why would they be worried about U.S. lifting sanctions, commercial sanctions? Well, because it's affecting them because they need goods in the country, and the only way they can get them is by trade. Right now they're trading through China, which is like a little channel, a little tunnel through which, that's their umbilical cord that keeps the country running to a great extent because they don't produce enough stuff because they're not efficient. And so North Korea will not survive if the rest of the world collapses. Neither will Cuba because they need other countries. In fact, let me tell you another anecdote. When I was in Cuba, I asked my handlers over there, and I said, Cuba runs quite inefficiently. And they said, yeah, we know. Oh, you know? Yeah, we know. Well, why don't you run it efficiently or more efficiently than you have today? And they said, well, in order to do so, we would have to give incentives to people, monetary incentives. I said, okay. And they said, well, if we give monetary incentives to people, it'll destroy morale, revolutionary morale. And it would bring out the worst in man. And so that was their answer. So what they do is they rely on the black market, and just don't get caught and you'll do okay. Okay, nobody will do anything to you. Okay, another comment here. Lots of them, like I said. Fellow says there are very many marriages that the partnership has separate bank accounts, because I said that that's the definition of marriage, one bank account. If you have two bank accounts, you're not married, because what, you're ready to run. In partner we trust? I guess not, right? Especially in this day and age, especially in the cities. No one trusts anyone, especially their partner. They've heard so many stories, so they don't even get married. And a lot of women don't want to get pregnant or have children because of all the little stories that they hear out there, all these tales. So yeah, this fellow who says many marriages that the partnership has separate bank accounts, well, they don't meet the definition, so they're not married. That's the answer to that. Okay? Very simple. Yeah, you got to meet the definition. The definition is that you need to have one bank account and not two. Okay, another fellow raises a little more important issue. He says the following. He says, once more, Bill is in conflict with his own beliefs, which he is calling theories. He claims to make no predictions, but he is claiming again and again, we are the last generation on Earth. Yes, I do claim that. And this claim is a prediction. No, it's not a prediction. See, when you do a prediction, you got to set a date and time. See, I can make a prediction right now and say there will be an eclipse, guaranteed. And you say, I bet you $1 million that there won't be an eclipse. And as long as we don't put a date, you won't win the bet. Okay, I got to put a date and time. I got to say there's going to be an eclipse tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Then you have something to verify. But otherwise, if I say there won't be an eclipse or there will be an eclipse, and I don't put a date and time, when it's going to happen, well, is that a prediction? So we got to separate the issue here. The issue is that I'm not making any prediction. It has nothing at all to do with prediction. You're focusing on the wrong aspect. The correct context here is that we're talking about explanation of a mechanism. How an extinction happens, especially a mass extinction in the case of man. How does a mass extinction happen? And what we're doing is extrapolating what happened to all the other animals in the past that became extinct to the future, to us humans, and we're saying we cannot avoid that same mechanism. If food disappears, humans will die no matter what, invariably. And so the issue here is not that it's a prediction in the sense that we're going to put a date and time and say, oh, on the 1st of May of, the year 2026, we're all going to die, or the last man is going to die. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that we cannot avoid the mechanism that killed the animals in the past in a mass extinction or in mass extinctions. We cannot avoid that same mechanism. Therefore, we will die, okay, because the mechanism is unavoidable. That's why it's not a prediction in the traditional sense of saying, give me a date and time. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with an unavoidable mechanism. And I'm not sure if I got through to you, but that's what it is, and people don't understand that. The context is important here to understand what the word prediction means. We're not making any prediction. We're explaining a mechanism saying that we cannot avoid what happened to the other animals. Okay. And the animals in the past died because food disappeared, and we cannot avoid becoming extinct if food disappears. And what we're saying is food will disappear because that is the mechanism Mother Nature uses to get rid of species, even if they're the apex predators like we are. So yeah, we cannot avoid extinction. And we will, obviously, become extinct. I say quite soon. Whatever soon means to you. You have to make up your own time frame, depending on your education, on your research, on your upbringing. But yeah, we were going to die. And here you can see what's happened. For 90% maybe or more of human lifetime, we were hunter-gatherers. We just killed an animal and lived another day. That was it. And then, anyway, the numbers are not important here, but they're just the magnitudes are important. The fact that you can see what's happening to the numbers here. About 10,000 years ago, we went into farming. And then 300 years ago or so, we went into manufacturing. That was the mode of production, primary mode of production. We also had different types of families in these eras. We had in the hunter-gathering, we had group sex. Farming, we had patriarchal societies. Manufacturing was mom and pop, the nuclear family. And today in the service economy, we have the bachelor. Okay, we're moving into the bachelor mode. And yeah, we went. In fact, there's two categories there, as you can see. I've updated that graph. We used to have labor-intensive services, like things that you did with your hands, and today we have essentially self-service. In other words, internet jobs. Everybody is an entrepreneur, all on his own. Okay, and so yeah, and I say that that is essentially unemployment. That's what that kind of work is. It's unemployment because we're not producing anything anymore. And it's the goods that make up the wealth of the planet. And when God looks from up there, Mother Nature, the devil, the devil's down there, I think, and they look at our planet, they only see what's real, what's there, the objects, the things we made. They don't see the promises, insurance, banking. They don't see any of that. Bitcoin. They don't see any of that. That's all floating in the air. There's none of that. That's just faith. That's all that is, faith. So we have an economy today built on faith. And when, in God we trust, we don't trust anymore in God, well, then faith is gone.